Not too much, just enough. As you can see, it actually does start to bend. Hey, what's up, Speedy's Garage Gang, and welcome back to the Speedy's Garage YouTube channel. Tonight, I'm performing a project in preparation for a project, if that makes any sense. And I can't take credit for this idea. It's been floating around, and there's a company that actually makes these things, but they're a little expensive in my opinion, and they're nice, but they had a couple of features that I honestly just didn't care too much about. And I got to thinking, I bet I can make something very similar and save a few bucks in the process. So what I've got coming up is some restoration on Project Forerunner or Sport Runner over there. And one of the big things I'm doing is some maintenance. And I'm gonna need to swap out all the fluids, like the differentials and the transfer case. And I use this Mobil 1 stuff, the 75W90. And I don't know why companies put this type of product in a squirt bottle. It's really hard to get it in the fill hole, and the transfer case is way up high. The front differential is a little tricky because you can't get the bottle to sort of tilt to get the fluid to come out. Some companies have gone to collapsible bags for this type of product, which I guess works or should work quite a bit better. I considered just putting some clear vinyl tubing on the end of one of these and trying to do it that way. I've done it in the past with those little pumps that slip into the bottle, and they screw on, and you end up having to pump the fluid into those places. And that ended up being a headache because you don't really have good leverage when you're under the car and you're trying to pump the bottle. And when it gets empty, it's slipping all around. And then when you have to switch the pump from one bottle to the next, now you've made a pretty considerable, at least I did, made a pretty considerable mess. So what I thought I could do is come up with some way to make a transfer pump. They have a pressure gauge on them. They got a good pump, they're thick. And I believe the newer ones even have a Schrader valve on them, which is really just a tire stem, so that you could technically pop a shop air connection on there and air them up real quick. You have to be careful because you don't want to go to like 10 or 15 PSI. I personally didn't mind pumping it. So I've come up with an idea that I think I can do this pretty cheap. I got some products and some supplies to do it with, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to get it done. Okay, for starters, I picked up one of these, and it's just a regular old weed sprayer. And I went with the 1 gallon size because I want it to be easy to maneuver when I'm underneath a vehicle. And I didn't think I'd be doing more than a gallon of fluid very often anyway. And if I did, I could always just top it up. Let's see what we got. Oops. Brand doesn't really matter. This one was, I think it was like 12 bucks at one of the big box stores. So, pretty cheap. 1 gallon size, like I said. It doesn't appear to be graduated. Well, I actually just realized it actually is graduated, but it was just really hard to see, so I used a black Sharpie to make that a little bit easier. It's got the pump mechanism, obviously. The main things we're interested in are the draw tube, and these are, I believe they're 1/4 inch ID inside diameter, and the sprayer. So that's sprayer part, and again, that was like 12 bucks, I think. I picked up some 3/8 OD outside diameter, which is 1/4 ID clear vinyl tubing, and that's going to kind of be the magic, I believe. And then finally, I couldn't find this at the big box store. I had to order this online, and I'll leave a link in the description if you're looking for one of these. But this is basically a 1/4 inch ball valve. So on and off. That's off, that's on, and that's going to make it a lot easier to use. And my plan is to basically replace all of this with part of this tube, the clear tube going into the tank, this clear tube coming out, and then basically you put your fluid in here, and when you pressurize it works just like the Motive one I showed you. Now it's forcing the fluid out when you open the valve. So that's the theory of operation right there. Open the valve, I start getting fluid, and when I filled up the differential and I start to see it trickle out, just shut the valve. Done. So now I got to figure out how to connect all these pieces together. The nice thing is it's got some barbs on it already, which is good. I don't think this will be too complicated. I've seen some use, what are they called? Hose clamps. worm gear clamps, whatever you want to call them. I don't even think you're going to need that because you're only going to pump this up to 10, maybe 15 PSI, and I bet a zip tie. That's what I'm planning to use. I'm going to try a zip tie and see if that'll work. So now I just got to get busy. I'm going to start with this. And so this is the original tubing, and I'm assuming it's also 3/8 OD. It looks like it matches up close enough to me. It's got a barb on it already, so I'm wondering if I can just pull this out. I may have to go get a screwdriver or something, but I want to separate. See how that's got like a bulge in it? I want to separate this, pull this out so that I can put it on my clear tube. I've got some vinyl pipe cutters. I'll leave a link to these too in the description. They make this really easy, and the cuts are always super nice. So I cut that off, gonna call that good. Instead of fighting with this thing, I'm gonna try to just take a razor, see if I can separate it. That's what we needed right there. The 1/4 inch ID vinyl tubing I got is 10 feet long. I think it was like $4, pretty cheap. I took the cap off of the original hose, obviously. Don't forget to put that on. And then I'm going to try to just snap this back over, but if it fights me too much, that's pretty hard. I'm going to put a little rubbing alcohol right here to make that slip right on. So I'm going to need that. I could probably force it or really pushed it, but I'm tired and old. I don't want to fight with it that much. Be right back. All right, I got some alcohol. Grab a rag so I don't make a big mess. A little there, a little bit there. Hopefully, this makes it easier. Almost. Tight. I just couldn't get it to start, so I'm going to apply just a little bit of heat with a heat gun. Not too much. I don't want to melt the vinyl tubing. All right, that's pretty warm. Feels pretty pliable. Oh yeah, I should have done that from the start. You see that? Super easy. Now we'll let that cool, and it will be nice and sealed up. And the reason all that was important is because this piece is how your draw tube snaps in, and then that goes into the container, and this guy comes up here, seals it all up. So we did it right. I'm going to check. I should be able to pump this up, put my thumb over the end of the tube, and know that I'm good to go at this point. So, feel pressure. All right, so we know we're good to go for that part. Next, I'm going to turn my attention to the sprayer part. I think I want to leave that ridge. It's got an O-ring on it too, which I don't think I'm going to need, because this was made to thread down onto, you know, the handle. But I like that ridge that's on there, because I feel like I can heat that tube up and slide it over that ridge and get a sealing surface if I need to use a zip tie or something. So I think I'm going to cut this off a little bit shorter, because I don't need that much, like maybe half. Like that. That way I don't have to push the hose as far. And then that end doesn't come off. At least if it does, I can't tell it. I'm going to cut it off. So now I don't need that part either. That can go. What I'm thinking I'd like to do, I mean, this would technically work just like it is. But what I'd like to do is try to put a bend in it so that I can just hang it on the differential or the transfer case or whatever And that way my hands are sort of free to pump the pump sprayer. The question is, how do you bend this without causing it to crease and close up? I need to think about that for a minute. This is what I came up with. I found a piece of 10 gauge wire would just about perfectly fit inside that tube. And what I'm thinking is that'll help kind of shore up the tube when I'm bending it. I decided it was a little bit long. I want it long enough where I can reach places if I need to, but not so long that it's getting in the way. So I kind of thought about how to hold it, and I figure a lead on it or a hooked area on it about 2.5 inches long was about right. So that's kind of what I came up with, and then thought maybe a 24 millimeter socket would be a good base to use to start to bend it, but it's stiff. So trusty heat gun again. So I'm going to recommend, if you're doing this, try one of these. It has tended to make things a little bit easier. I'm going to push the wire down in there so that I got that shored up. I'm going to decide, I'm going to take a Sharpie and sort of decide where I want it to bend so that it's long enough. Probably about right here. That's probably about right. If not, we can always adjust it. And I'm going to heat this. Not too much, just enough. And as you can see, it actually does start to bend. Hold it like that for a minute, let it take its shape. There it is. So after I heated it, I didn't show y'all this part, I ran it under cold water. Cold water will kind of quench the plastic, make it hold its shape, and there is what I ended up with, which is about perfect. I can kind of hook it or hang it into a transfer case or a differential. If it's a little bit long, I have the option to trim it just a little bit, but I'm going to kind of leave it that length for now. I expect it'll do pretty good. Next thing I had to decide on is how far away from the outlet that I want the ball valve to turn it on and off. My thinking is that if I'm under a car and I'm putting this somewhere, I probably want this pretty close so that I can just flip it on while I'm sitting right there. So I decided on 6 inches. So that's going to be, ball valve's going to be right about 6 inches from the, clear tube before it gets to this guy. So now I'm going to try to use the heat gun to heat this up so that this goes over that notch and then just connect the ball valve up. So that's next. So that was a pretty tight fit. I actually had to heat it a couple of times and then inch it up. And I basically got it over that notch enough that if it needs a zip tie will fit. But honestly, I did the same thing. After it was over and where I wanted it, I ran it under cold water to quench that clear vinyl. And now I bet you couldn't get that. You'd probably have to tear up the vinyl to get it off of there. So I doubt it's even going to need a zip tie, but it's an option just in case. Now I'm going to kind of decide the orientation. I kind of like up is off and down is on. So I'm going to install this, kind of thinking about how I might be under the car. And I think I'm going to go right in the side like this. I might need some heat on this too. Yep. I am going to run that under cold water. Be right back. And there it is. And I tried to think about, when this is in something, trying to fill it, that this was sort of sideways so that it was easy to get to. So it runs, perpendicular to the output. Now, the last thing we have to decide is how much tubing do I want to run from the pressurized tank. I definitely want it to be able to be out from underneath the car that I might be working on, but I don't want it so long that it's a pain to clean it up, because you're going to have fluid in this tube when you're done, and you're going to have to somehow get it to drain back into the tank and then potentially clean this up. So I'm going to get out the tape measure and kind of take a look at a car and see how far I might need that to be out from underneath one, and go from there. Here's the finished product. So what I ended up with was a 3-foot length from the end to the tank. I feel like that's plenty, plus the little bit that the end gives me. This was 6 inches, this is another 6. So all in all, about 4 feet. Now, $1 million question, let's see if it works. We've got the ball valve shut, everything's tight. The pressure release, that's a minute. Make sure that's tight. Felt it tighten up, so there we go. All right, so I'll be using this thing in the next week or so, and you guys will get to see that. I'm curious how fast fluid will transfer. The only thing I would have liked to have been able to do is use 3/8 ID tubing. When you're talking about diameter of tubing, a little bit more makes a big difference. It's volume by percent, things like that. So it would let the thicker fluid, like that gear oil, flow a little bit faster. However, if this lets me just hook it in place and pump this up and let it go, what do I care? If I'm underneath the car for 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, what's the difference in that and just 1 or 2 minutes? Not really much of anything, to be honest. So that would be the only thing. If there was a way to run 3/8 ID tubing in one of these, I actually considered doing that, but it was going to mean drilling this out, using some type of thicker tube, maybe epoxying around it to seal it up, because remember, it's pressurized. Doing it this way just kept everything super easy, and everything just sort of just clicked together, and it was very cheap. If I got the lengths wrong for some reason, if I'm not happy with the 3 feet here and this is $4 for 10 feet of this tube, and it's easy to change. Total investment in this thing, including everything, is like 25 bucks. I think it's about $25. And I even like it because I use this tube. I can do it like this, and it stores it. So there it is. You know, that's another reason I went with that 3-foot length, is it made it a nice coil, so that when I'm storing this thing and it's not in use, it's a nice little package. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. Be sure to check us out on Instagram. It's @Speedys_garage, as well as the website, www.speedysgarage.net. And hopefully, I'll see you out there.